Welcome to 5 terrific tips for sustaining equitable multi-level systems of supports. My name is Gomo Her, and I'm one of the presenters. I have been with the Wisconsin RTI Center since 2013 as a technical assistant coordinator for the West region. My focus is on academics through the lens of culturally responsive practices, literacy, and English learners. With me is my colleague.
Hi, and I'm Jennifer Granke, and I'm also with the Wisconsin RTI Center, and I've been with them since June of 2011. I am a technical assistance coordinator for the North region, which is CSIS 8, 9, and 12. I have a focus on PBIS, and I also sit on the Wisconsin RTI Center Family Engagement Work Group.
Before we share deeper information around the 5 factors for sustainability and the specifics of each factor, let's go over some housekeeping logistics. This is the graphic that represents your school's equitable multi-level system of supports. While you will hear us highlight multiple key features throughout this session, we choose to connect to equity and strong universal level of support. As you know, equity is at the heart of the framework. You will hear equity embedded throughout this session. So if you see this icon on a slide, it is a reminder that the content is closely connected to the key feature of equity. This graphic of the number 5 is also our slides as well. Given the fact that our session is based upon this actual research brief shown on the right side of the slide, we will go into some specifics within each of the 5 factors. You should be able to understand how the 5 factors look, feel, and sound like in schools. In this session, we will focus on these 3 outcomes. The first outcome is understand the essential tips that lead to sustainability, as well as identify at least 2 pivotal strategies to improve systemic practices. And finally, develop next steps to implement strategies. We want to reiterate that the session outcomes are closely tied to tier fidelity inventory and school-wide implementation review. These are the features: 1.11, 1.15, and from the school-wide implementation review, line item 61. Before we dive into the 5 tips of sustainability, we want to quickly provide an overview of the levels of implementation and where sustainability lives during the school's journey to improvement. As you can see here on the slide, the 4 functional implementation stages include purpose building, known as exploration. This stage is about gaining support and building commitment. The second stage is infrastructure, also known as installation. This is the planning stage and the implementation of the usability tests. The third stage is known as initial implementation. This is the trying it out stage, where the innovation is implemented school-wide. And the final stage is full implementation. This stage involves refining. There is a stage at the beginning of an implementation journey that is considered not in place. The stage consists of innovations that are not a priority or a focus yet within the school. Notice where sustainability is located. It is right after full implementation stage. Hence, sustainability is not a stage, but rather it's about the specific sets of activities the school implements to improve the innovation over time in order to achieve desirable outcomes. That's it. Knowing where sustainability is within the stages of implementation, we will now dive into the 5 tips of sustainability. Remember, the tips are the specific sets of activities or strategies that would transform the school toward equitable outcomes. Tip number 1, the school goals, policies, vision, mission, and other programs aligned to an equitable multi-level system supports and specific key features. Tip number 2, staff monitor continuously and have feedback systems in place. Engage all stakeholders with data, feedback around data, and development of solutions. Tip number 3, new personnel are an integral part of teams. Strengthen systemic structure to seek after diverse expertise and perspectives on teams. Tip number 4, further systemic training and ongoing coaching support is provided after initial training. And tip number 5, processes for frequent continual communication and recommitment. Commit to the systemic vision and systematic practices of vitally energized. This leads me to tip number 1 that states the school goals, policies, vision, mission, and programs align to an equitable multi-level systems of support and specific key features. In tip number 1, there are 4 positive and proactive strategies. The first strategy is to articulate and commit to the school's vision, mission, and goals. This requires your school to put procedures and practices in place so that all learners, families, educators, and leaders know and are fully committed to the school's vision, mission, and goals. Here are some actionable steps to consider, such as to ensure the school's vision and mission is grounded on culturally proficient standards, establishing one-sentence vision or mission, and ensuring the school's vision, mission, and goals are visible, accessible, and communicated with all stakeholders in the school and beyond the neighborhood. The second strategy is to collaborate with families and community to align the school's goals, policies, vision, and mission to an equitable multi-level system of supports. This means educators and leaders know about the cultural characteristics, history, values, beliefs, and behaviors of the ethnic or cultural group they serve. They seek to collaborate among staff, learners, families, and communities to make the complex work of system change. If you need more information about how to engage stakeholders in a culturally competent manner, check out our other on-demand session called Doing For versus Doing With, a new way of doing business through culturally competent stakeholder engagement. This recorded session will walk you through the how-to. The third strategy is to reflect, investigate, and execute decisions based on system and outcomes data in order to develop and implement strategic practices. That means systemic decisions must be grounded on data and not on the discretion of one individual. Here are some actionable steps to consider. Reflect and investigate what the school believes about using data and data practices. Develop a school assessment calendar to take both tier fidelity inventory and school-wide implementation review on an annual basis. Develop a school data committee to oversee and manage your system assessments, and establish consistent routines to review system and outcome data regularly. And finally, the fourth step is to develop tools, resources, time, and capacities to support the implementation and sustainability of an equitable multi-level system support. Developing and sustaining an equitable multi-level system support is not a shiny object. Along with equity, Wisconsin's model to inform cultural response practices, this is a systemic framework that is grounded on transformation for equity. Time and resources are committed to improving the school's equitable multi-level system of supports. So here's how a school went about in reflecting, investigating, and execute decisions based on system and outcome data in order to develop and implement strategic practices. Remember to click on the school icon below on your right-hand side corner if you would like to follow along. In the spring of 2020, the school board directed any town school district to conduct an equity audit on their policies, programs, procedures, and practices. Under this guidance from their school board, the district administrators have ensured that any town school district develop their strategic plan based on Wisconsin's framework. As part of their continuous improvement journey, the school board and district administrators have made the commitment to work closely with the Wisconsin RTI Center, in particular their regional technical assistant coordinator, to ensure that their school building leadership team has the knowledge and skills to take the tier fidelity and school-wide implementation review. With the facilitation from the regional technical assistant coordinator, the school was successful in collecting reliable and valid data to progress monitoring the strategic plan. An outcome from this facilitated process was that the building leadership teams decided to implement reviewing your multi-level system of supports through a culturally responsive lens as one of the critical tools in the equity auditing process. The building leadership team is aware that deconstructing inequitable systems will take time and commitment. Implementing the tool is a great starting point for the team. Let's move on to tip number 2.
Tip 2 is that staff monitor data continuously and have feedback systems in place. They engage all stakeholders with data and data decision-making that informs solution development for continuous improvement. Here are some strategies that you can use. The first strategy is all information provided by stakeholders is considered when drafting a decision. The draft is then brought to the stakeholders for additional input. Stakeholders understand the data they interact with, the intention and purpose of the data, and how to utilize the data in a meaningful way. stakeholders can explain the data that is shared with them, what the data mean, why they are providing input regarding the data, and they can explain how they use the data to make informed decisions. The second strategy is systemic processes are in place to actively collect and monitor the data on a regular basis. All staff know when student outcome data is collected, when system data and practice data is collected, and they also know how it is monitored for continuous improvement. They identify how solutions implemented with fidelity resulted in improved academic achievement, behavior, or other outcomes. Staff can identify a solution, perhaps a change in practice, that's put in place as it was intended and that it produced the improved outcomes that they were seeking to get. The third strategy is that data is reviewed in an aggregate and disaggregate manner in order to provide the knowledge and skills stakeholders need to make data-based decisions. When reviewing data, if we look at overall aggregate data, we may see that our outcomes look okay. When we disaggregate data, that is when we look deeper into the data to see if some groups of students or staff are underserved. For example, a school report card may show that a school is meeting or exceeding expectations on the report card. But when we look into the data on the report card, we can see student groups in categories of students with disabilities, students experiencing poverty, students of color. These groups may be at a lower performing level and have lower attendance rates than the overall rate for the school. If we didn't disaggregate, we would never recognize that our system is not supporting each and every student in an equitable manner. Or we may recognize when we have professional development opportunities, our core instructional staff are at the meeting, but our special education staff are not at the meeting. The final strategy is stakeholders take the onus to be culturally competent, reflective, and investigative of the data and analyze current practices within the system. Everyone involved with reviewing data take on the responsibility to be culturally competent as individuals and as a group. Instead of blaming others, we reflect upon what the system can do to be more supportive and proactive for all. We want to drill down into the data to analyze how our current system is producing the outcomes we are getting, and then make systemic changes to produce better outcomes for each and every person affected by our system. Here's an example of how a school collects data and change their practice with some positive unintended consequences. Remember to click for school story icon if you would like to follow along. So based upon data reviewed monthly by Your Town Middle School PBIS team, they noticed a trend during passing time. Their problem statement was that they had more than 100 office referrals per day during passing times. It was recognized that the halls were too congested and there were very few adults monitoring the hallways. They brought the data to all staff during a staff meeting led by the PBIS team, and the staff helped come up with a solution that was agreeable to all. The staff came up with the practice to have teachers assigned to hallways at specific locations and times throughout passing time, rotating so all teachers participate in connecting with students during passing time. Just making this one change in practice, they reduced their office referrals by 30%. Then they also staggered the passing time bells so that certain grades, so grade 5 and 6 would pass during the first 3 minutes, and then grade 7 and 8 passed during the second 3 minutes. An unintended consequence the school noted was on their school climate surveys, students stated they had more positive relationships with teachers after this practice was implemented. This was a larger middle school building.
Tip number 3 states, new personnel are an integral part of teams. Strengthening systemic structure to seek after diverse expertise and perspectives on teams. This strategy addresses the frustrations the administrators express, like, I can't get a Black male educator in my school, or we can't keep our teachers of color. These challenges are real. So here are some proactive and positive strategies to consider. The first essential strategy is to ensure the school's beliefs, values, culture, and practices are identified and implemented to seek out diverse expertise and perspectives. This means the school honors and recognizes the cultural experiences, perceptions, and worldviews of the cultural groups and intentionally seek out diverse stakeholders to exchange information, share expertise, and problem solve. The second strategy is to ensure individuals that make up the team's behaviors and collective commitments are aligned to the district or school's vision, mission, goals, purpose, etc. The individuals that make up the team must believe in this work. This is what I call coalition of the willing. These individuals demonstrate unwavering belief in every learner to achieve success and a shared commitment to the vision for all. The third strategy is to ensure all members model cultural competency by leading, modeling, and advocate for equity. This means the school transforms into a culturally proficient organization where they are aware of and know the diverse communities within their school, create informal and formal decision-making groups that are inclusive, model problem-solving and conflict resolution strategies, learn about underserved culture groups, make learning about underserved cultural groups and their experiences and perspectives an integral part of the school's professional development. And finally, the school intentionally seeks out and engages staff that best represents the underserved populations. This is what I call peer accountability, where the school is tapping into the expertise within the local context. These individuals bridge the gap between the school and home and community cultures. So here's an example of how a school went about in seeking after diverse expertise and perspectives as part of their continuous improvement journey. Jeffrey Canada Promise Academy leadership team and staff have been working to unpack individual and systemic shared stereotypes, biases, and prejudice that are causing team members to develop deficit-based views of students and families. They are aware that deficit-based thinking can make subcultural behaviors appear as atypical from the mainstream culture, and individual and cultural expressions appear as disorder rather than differences. This often results in a amount of office referrals, particularly with disrespect and with their African American students. After reflecting and investigating multiple data points, the building leadership team reached out to the district equity coordinator, the district liaison, and district parent coordinator to help them examine their data and practices and identify next possible steps in terms of how they can culturally and competently engage with the community of the underserved populations. Tip number 4 states, further systemic training and ongoing coaching and support is provided after initial training. The first essential strategy is that the design of the professional plan for sustainability is grounded on adult practice data, student outcome data, and system-level data. This means the school must use multiple data to guide the design of a professional development plan for the next couple school years. For building capacity, the professional development plan must guide the ongoing training, coaching, and support after a team attends a training. We encourage the leadership team to start by aggregating and disaggregating existing data and to implement a digging deeper process to analyze existing system gaps and identify needs in specific focus areas. The professional opportunity selection must match the needs of the practitioners and system. The dangerous detour and seductive shortcut is to impulsively select professional learning opportunities without a professional plan. Such practice is unsustainable. The second strategy is the recognition that academic, social, emotional learning and behavior are weaved throughout an equitable multi-level system support and integrated within the professional learning plan. That said, all professional learning plans should encompass the academic, which is the cognitive, the behavioral, social, emotional skills, so that all participants, learners clearly understand the outcomes of the professional learning opportunities. The third strategy encompasses an awareness of systemic practices, which leads to the ability to advocate and develop ongoing coaching, training, and resources, including the time to analyze data, research-based materials, and peer learning that are a match to the staff's needs. Oftentimes, we hear cases like the person who was in charge of our tier 2 or 3 suddenly passed away, or X took a different position, so we don't have anyone to oversee our PBIS assessments, etc. Relying on one individual's knowledge and skills to oversee the development of an equitable multi-level system support is unsustainable. Leaders commit to equity must develop an awareness of the unhealthy practices and allocate time and resource to ensure ongoing training, coaching, and support are readily available, as well as an integral part of their professional learning plan. And finally, the fourth strategy is the mind shift and culture shift. This is an expectation to build the capacity of shared knowledge, skills, and expertise around an equitable multi-level system support before a training, during a training, and after training. This is to ensure that the historical memories and expertise do not leave with the individuals when they leave the school. Addressing questions like, if something was to happen to me, who would replace me, is essential to sustainability. Here is an example of how a school went about in designing the professional learning plan for sustainability that is grounded on adult practice data, student outcome data, and system level data. After reflecting and investigating their system and outcome data in December, the building leadership team realized that any student groups who have IEPs are identified as English learners, economically disadvantaged, or Latinx, Black, or multiracial are more likely to perform below basics in English language arts. Being aware of the trend data, the leadership team knew they needed to take their school through the equity model to inform culturally responsive practices journey. After developing their culturally responsive practices professional plan, the leadership team began to build their staff's will through the examination of practitioners and institutional beliefs, values, cultures, and practices, specifically the face of racist, prejudicial, biased, or stereotypical comments that may contribute to the success of all learners. They also attended Beyond Diversity with Disproportionality Technical Assistant Network in February. The building leadership team recognized they couldn't do this work alone. By April, the building leadership team reached out to the Wisconsin RTI Center and connected with their regional technical assistant coordinators, both PBIS and academics, to build their knowledge around the school-wide implementation review, the self-assessments for academics. They have been taking tier fidelity inventory and wanted to ensure that the school begins to work on the integration of their equitable multi-level system of supports. By working closely with the regional techs, the building leadership team is building and activating the background knowledge around the SIR, examining their impacts on students and the system's high expectations on students, and planning to attend universal reading instruction the next summer.
And our final tip is tip number 5. Processes are put in place for frequent, continual communication and recommitment. Commitment to the systemic vision and systematic practices are vital to energize. This means that it is understood by all stakeholders that the leadership team's role is to build the capacity of all staff, that the team continually creates space and time to address the whole staff's collective commitment to the strategies, practices that they have all agreed upon. The team needs to ensure that there is an effective communication plan in place, and the plan can be adjusted over time based on needs. Here are some strategies that you could see, hear, or feel implemented within a school or district. Knowing the strengths of educators within the system, leaders are able to identify and implement effective and efficient communication practices that are matched to the staff and stakeholders they serve. This means that every staff member, which includes our custodial staff, cafeteria staff, itinerant staff, everyone, receives pertinent information in a timely manner that is aligned to the stakeholders' most effective mode of receiving communication and in an understandable format. Also, implementing systemic communication routines, the relevancy of the information in alignment to the goals and the expectation of the communication. All stakeholders know when communication is sent out based upon the communication routine, such as maybe every day at 3 p.m., maybe Monday, Wednesday, Friday morning, certain alerts, just so that everyone is aware when those communications come out. The communication explains the relevancy to the school's goals to all that receive that communication, and everyone who receives it knows what is expected of them based upon receipt of that communication. Also, implementing collaborative structures to exchange information and share expertise. So collaborative structures such as PLCs, staff meetings, grade level content meetings, they provide the space and the time to process information with others and to share their expertise and perceptions of the information. Here's a school story that highlights the last strategy that I mentioned. Yorktown Elementary School, with a staff of 12, developed a process to provide equity of voice, frequent and continual communication, and recommitment through their staff meetings. They have bi-monthly staff meetings. The PBIS team meets one additional time each month to plan for those staff meetings. During the first monthly staff meeting, they review student data. They divide up into grade level bands and come up with ideas for how the adults will change their practices to support the students. Then they come back together as a whole group, all 12 of them, to decide on 1 or 2 of the practices, and they all agree upon that. Then at the second monthly meeting, they review the data in their grade band groups and reflect upon their adult practices to see if they need to adjust their practice or maintain what they have decided to do. They use the balance measure of looking at both what the adult practice change was and if it's been beneficial to the students, so they look at student outcome data as well. This is done with all staff to ensure that everyone has a voice and that they all agree upon the actions that have been taken. So here are the 5 tips that you can access. You can use the link on slide 5 and download them today. On behalf of the Wisconsin students and families, thank you for attending 5 terrific tips for sustaining an equitable multi-level system of support. We value and appreciate your feedback, your partnership, and your commitment to this work.